Welcome to the Women of Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Calder-Hume. Today, I want to talk about the first part of the following equation: values plus goals equals satisfying achievement. I want to talk about identifying our top core values. Core values are the top 3 to 10 fundamental beliefs that inform the way we live. When we can define what our core beliefs are, we can more easily make decisions that will lead us to the end results we really want. As ambitious women, we know we want to achieve X, Y, and Z, but there are many ways to achieve the same goal. What brings deep satisfaction in life is to act in accordance with our deepest values along a path to achieve something we truly desire. So, values plus goals equals satisfying achievement. Before a few years ago, I had never sat down and determined my own top values in any kind of a concrete way. I've been taught many values by parents and teachers and been instructed to uphold many more in my community and my church and work organizations. And I'm a very values-oriented individual, but I had never been taught how to choose and verbalize my top values, let alone apply those values to my everyday life choices. I found huge value and direction in determining my core values and applying them, and I'm going to share how I did that to hopefully help someone out there do the same and find the same peace. At the end, I will share a simple how-to for anyone out there who hasn't nailed down their core values quite yet. Next month, when we discuss setting ambitious goals, our understanding of core values will serve a really important part of choosing which path to take to achieve those goals. So this is what got me started identifying my core values. Years ago, I started to seriously consider homeschooling my children. I loved the idea of homeschooling, but was unclear how I would feel about it long term, especially as I anticipated having a brand new baby entering the family right as we were beginning that homeschool experience. Choosing to remove my kids from public school also meant that my world would shift dramatically. It wasn't something that was totally socially acceptable in my current circle, especially as I had spent the majority of the previous years on the PTO board. I was poised to become president for the next year. I had been volunteering a ton of time in the kids' school and fundraising for our charter school. Obviously, this was all pre-COVID, so I was in school a ton. I also wasn't raised around any homeschooled kids, and my mom was a public school teacher. I went to public school, and I didn't have any friends that I knew of who were homeschooled as kids, let alone doing it with their own children currently. So making the change to a home-based, mom-dependent education was going to influence way more than just my children's education. It would change my social structure as an adult. It would not be very well received by my family, and I would have to keep up my energy enough to be undeterred by misguided judgments and stigmas from other people. In order to make sure this change would work for me, I began to do a lot of research. Part of my process was to identify the best and most valuable use of my time alongside my personal and family goals in the long term. After writing out what I wanted my family to look like in 1 year, in 5 year, in 10-year, and 20-year segments, I found that what I valued most for my family is education, health, empathy, being world contributors, and being close as a family. I then pieced together what would have to happen in between each segment to get to that next level. And what I found was that there were many paths I could take to get the same end goal, one of those paths being to homeschool if I chose to devote my time that way. And it felt right, so I did. It was a really important exercise for me. I showed myself that my personal and family goals could intersect or not, and we could still achieve the same end goal as a family. Laying out my desired state of being freed me to think creatively about how I wanted to get there, not just defaulting to what I knew day to day. A few years later, as I started to unravel my core beliefs in therapy, I was asked to identify my top core values for the first time. And when I couldn't, my therapist gave me a really long list of possible options, and I read through them in about one sitting and casually circled the ones that I was interested in that might feel right. And I kind of starred my top 5 to 10, but I didn't really understand how to narrow things down. And I was really worried that maybe my list wasn't complete, that it was just some random list that she came up with, and maybe there was something left off that was really important to me. And definitely went down kind of a spiral of perfectionism in trying to determine this. And I decided that that fear of imperfection was not the place that I wanted to work from when identifying my core values. So I put the paper in a drawer for like 6 months and didn't really think about it a whole lot. After a few more months of therapy and digging deeper into who I truly am versus who I believed I was, I started to see patterns of where I was choosing to spend my time and what experiences rewarded me as well as depleted me. The most obvious experience that I loved and was rewarding was learning. I was thriving homeschooling my kids. I truly and deeply loved learning alongside them: history, biology, physics, chemistry, literature, child development with an education slant. I loved it all. I spent my money and my free time reading and discussing and building my life to support my love of learning. This felt extremely cheesy at the same time because my alma mater's goal for graduates is to become lifelong learners, and that is completely where I found myself. That is now my drive for educating my 4 children. I want my kids to avoid burnout, to get the formalities of education out of the way so that their natural learning patterns can take hold. I wanted to give them all the resources they need to learn what they felt compelled and curious to know. And at the same time, I was also recovering from this really intense pregnancy that required 6 months in bed with only occasional wheelchair excursions. That, by the way, is why I had so much time to do research, because I was literally in bed and couldn't do anything physical. My physical recovery from that experience was a very necessary. When you're on bed rest, the body deterioration is so rapid. I can't even explain to you how quickly going up the stairs became very challenging. So in my recovery, I really celebrated each milestone in moving my body again. Something as simple as being able to walk around the house without my feet killing me, because I was very slowly rebuilding those foot muscles to support my weight postpartum. Suddenly it became clear I valued growth, intellectually, emotionally, and physically. I thrived off expanding my understanding of the world and of myself and of how I can experience my body. Now, instead of casually reading a new book whenever I found an interesting one and then always running out of material all the time, I recognized and respected my desire to learn. Once I no longer viewed learning as an extra side thing alongside my life, I was able to see how it shaped my enjoyment of life. Learning was life. And so gathering resources to soak up became as regular and as important as making a grocery list each week. Books were my food. Websites, videos, Facebook, topic groups, friends, all became resources to go to and learn more from researched sources. I scheduled learning and growth into my week the same way I scheduled gym visits and date nights. It became a conscious, planned activity with the understanding that it fueled my love for living. I now flood myself with as much information on any topic I find interesting that I possibly can. Any project I'm working on in my life is the topic of my growth and learning. It's deeply sustaining, especially during times like the pandemic, where we were all so isolated, and especially as a homeschool mom, where I'm not going into an office or collaborating with others in person each day. Growing inside my own brain and body is what I had at the time. In the years since owning this value of growth for myself, I'm happy to report that I've actually overwhelmed my desire for growth several times, something I did not think was possible. I actually have a backstock of good books waiting to be devoured. It is glorious to live in an age of internet alongside an education that has taught me how to think logically and identify good source material so that I can continue to learn and grow and build. I'm grateful every day for my English degree and the many research papers I wrote, and I am even more grateful to get to choose the topics for all of my research and writing these days. So once I nailed down growth, my other top values came easily. I remember sitting with my kids at the park somewhere in the Pacific Northwest during our big RV trip across the US in 2020, and I thought about the businesses I'd started, the majors I'd considered in college and turned down and why, the meaningful jobs I'd had, and where I enjoyed working in my community, and I realized that I valued providing true service to my community. Wherever I was choosing to apply myself, I wanted my work to feed the people receiving it. I love literature and has expanded my soul to the core level. I think books are a key way that we can expand our understanding of the world and walk in someone else's shoes and learn how to have empathy. Majoring in English might not seem like a service role, but it was for me. I'd originally gotten into a competitive advertising program, but decided that I did not want to spend my creativity selling someone else's agenda. M&Ms, condoms, cheap plastic toys designed for a landfill. I didn't want someone else dictating the scope of my work. Writing, however, allowed me to access the soul, to tell stories, to expand empathy, and to share information across the world, and to work independent from any imposed agenda. And we'll talk more on that later. Writing was my best personal use. I thought back to my choice to be a stay-at-home mother and the impact I was choosing to have on my children and how I was raising them and now educating them. I thought back to my years serving on the PTO presidency and how my time there was about serving my local community by supporting art programs, getting a soccer field put in for the kids, and providing school-wide Olympic game experiences and supporting our fantastic educators. I thought of my church service and where I donated money. It all came down to serving others at a deep values level. I also saw how very, very easily this value became out of balance for me. As a mother, as a woman, I'm sure you can relate. My service was very frequently expected, both from myself and my community. And it was absolutely demanded. It was expected to be free because of my chosen job as an unpaid full-time caregiver. Clearly, I spend all my time at home doing nothing, right? My church demanded even more from me, and although my personality has no problem saying it, saying no was not something I was taught how to do as a kid. And so all this social programming combined showed me how service was really important to me, but that this value was really, really off balance. I was spending way too much of my time and energy serving anywhere and everywhere that asked, instead of consciously choosing where to serve, where I could provide the best value and find the most purpose. The pandemic pause of 2019 to 2020 helped me step out of that rat race of expected female service. Sidebar, did you know that among mixed gender groups, women volunteer 50% more frequently than men for undesirable tasks? Women are more likely to be asked to do undesirable tasks and even more likely to accept direct requests when asked. Ladies, we need to be really careful with our yeses. In non-mixed gender groups, men volunteer just as frequently as women. They can do it, so let's stop the madness. Okay, back to what I was saying. The pandemic pause of 2019 to 2020 helped me step out of that rat race of expected female service to realign with myself, where I wanted to serve, and now reemerge into the world showing up as I choose to do, rather than where I'm asked or expected to do so. I reassess the way I give service each Sunday as I sit down to plan my week. Do I have time to bring a meal to someone else? Do I want to volunteer in my child's classroom? Is that actually the best way to connect with my child this week or this month? And if so, how often? Do I need to be in charge of the homeschool co-op, or can I support it? Is writing that article the actual best use of my talents and energy, or do I choose to apply myself elsewhere? Can I shoulder a role in my church long term without sacrificing my health, family, or my ability to serve with joy instead of resentment? Because I value service, I found myself saying yes all the time because yes, I genuinely would love to help you. I want to support my teachers. I want to bring meal to anybody who's sick. I believe in my community and what they're doing, and I want to help and support. But what I was doing wasn't working for me because in the back end, I found myself scattered, unfocused on one area of impact, and not really having control over my sphere of influence because I was running all over the place. And I was serving without adding the value I needed to be providing in order to be satisfied and have joy. And that last realization led me to my most important and most underserved value, independence. It can be hard to view oneself as independent, especially when a stay-at-home mother who is, quote, dependent on her husband's income. And let's be real, if we wanted the number of kids we have and the house we have, my husband's career would look very differently than it does now. My support absolutely 100% has helped him be where he is. Okay. Anyway, as a stay-at-home mother dependent on her husband's income with 4 little kids spanning 7 years, all dependent on me for life and love and education, I am rarely alone. How can I possibly value independence when choosing into this life? But it's there, right? Wrapped inside every other value and goal, every dream and future I hope for. The thing is, being a stay-at-home parent is kind of like being an entrepreneur or being a small business owner. It is a huge investment of your assets, your time, your energy, and has, obviously financial trade-offs from a paid job. And it all results in what? A really unclear payout. What exactly are the end results of being a full-time caregiver? It's completely unknown. There are no financial benefits, and the role of raising children is a constant moving target. One can't even take credit for how the kids turn out because there are way too many variables, and so much is dependent on the child themselves. So you're creating your career goals from scratch, if you want to even call it that. There are no bosses to help a caregiver meet an end-of-year goal. There are no coworkers to bounce ideas off of unless you have a particularly invested partner. But chances are that living off one income has that partner, assuming you have one, very busy with work and unable to research sleep methods alongside you, at least to the same degree that you're able to devote. You become the authority and expert on your kid, and all those micro chats with the pediatrician, the dentist, other moms at the park, preschool teachers, and grade school teachers, all of that adds up to a level of understanding and knowledge that can't be duplicated. So you're running this business of family and children, navigating healthcare systems and grocery shopping and diets and organization and ROIs, only with the moving variable of your unique children. All of that floundering and learning on the spot and creating disciplinary systems from scratch from your own brain and balancing checkbooks and diaper sizes and clothes and everything, all of that is highly independent work. Independent work that can't be seen because you're called out of a conversation from a crying child, bound down in bed by a throbbing uterus, tied to a baby because there's now no one else to give a bottle and your highly researched sleep method. Okay, I'm keeping this door creak because it's my son interrupting me from the middle of my podcasting where I'm talking about how I can't have a complete thought because a child interrupts me. And I love my child and I'm glad he interrupted me. But here is a live, real life example. Let's try that again. Independent work that can't be seen because you're called out of a conversation by a crying child, bound down in bed by a throbbing uterus, tied to a baby because there is now no one else to give a bottle, and your highly researched sleep method favors baby sleeping in her bed 90% of the time so that she can sleep, so that you can sleep, so that you can sustain doing it all again tomorrow. All of that does not feel independent. It feels highly dependent. The high demands and dependence of little people. That, for me, sucked away my awareness and the obviousness of why I chose to spend my life this way. But I knew I loved learning. I knew I loved choosing what I learned next rather than receiving like a class syllabus or an assignment. I loved making sure my impact is meaningful rather than trivial. I love serving on a deep level that I opt into. I love teaching my children to love learning. I love replacing an education system that was causing stress and panic attacks and deep frustrating boredom with personalized learning opportunities for my children that they get to opt into. I loved that I got to do all of that without any oversight, without anyone else's end goals in mind, and with full awareness as to the why of each choice because I made it myself. I also saw how much independence I needed to feel balanced in my life. I needed more alone time to, have a complete thought or two, but also to self-reflect and make more conscious choices moving forward. And I craved more time to create something apart from my children that I alone could take credit for. I have so many friends who are fighting losing their identities as mothers as their children grow up and leave home because they have only identified themselves as mothers. And without day-to-day mothering, they feel lost. I don't want that. I lost myself in those early days of motherhood, back-to-back pregnancies, back-to-back postpartum depression. I'd forgotten who I was and what I enjoyed and what I would do with an hour to myself, let alone a day, let alone decades of time. I am unwilling to live in a way that puts me at risk of reliving those dark years. I will maintain my sense of self even as I raise my children. I will not allow myself to place my self-worth on their grades or achievements, careers, paychecks, church standing, or marital status. And that starts now. I have to explore my wants and create and move and do it on my own. So I started traveling on my own more, investing in myself financially and in my own time. I planned solo hikes into my week, stopped asking for feedback before publishing articles and podcasts, and I exercised my independence in every way I could think of. I set personal goals. I paused each time I had an impulse to ask for feedback and questioned if it was truly necessary to create the end goal I desired, or was it a habit and possibly a way to seek validation. Now, if I can do it on my own, I don't ask for input and I move forward. I give myself the validation I sought and move on. And it's interesting how exercising my independence actually has made me a stronger team player when those situations do arrive. I have a perspective to add. I have something new to contribute, and my voice is unique rather than being watered down or shamed into average compliance. When I do brainstorm in a group, the synergy is wonderful and I absolutely love it. But it can't happen if I'm not my own person first, if I don't give myself time and space and distance to develop myself. So my 3 core values in order of importance for me are independence, growth, and service. Now, I am absolutely winning life when I can express all 3 at once. Those are my 10 out of 10 hell yes activities. This podcast is one example. I am learning it all from scratch. I am my own podcast producer, marketer, advertiser, financial advisor, and copy editor. I have to constantly learn new things about audio equipment, algorithms, media regulations, interview skills, building websites and RSS feeds, audio clips, video clips. I plan and research and generate the content to provide what I feel is most valuable for you. This podcast is my service opportunity. It is the best thing I can do with my time and talents and energy right now. This is one thing I offer the world to make it better. Hitting all 3 values at once is fantastic. And I can do it when I travel and when I write, and whenever I find something that hits all 3, I will be all over it. As I sit down to plan my week, I actually write out all 3 words at the top of my planner to make sure I hit them all. And you might think, well, you'll hit them naturally if they're truly innate. But the thing is, it's all about balance. And I'm constantly still, like years later, taking off service items and carving out time for that independence. And that exchange has to be consciously done each week for me and frequently by the day, right? It's so easy to get those reversed. So now when a new opportunity arises, I can compare it not just against my end goals, but my living core values. It's so easy to decide what to do with my time and my talents when I look at it through these lenses. Together, my goals and values bring my best choices into focus very quickly. I don't have to learn nearly as much through lived experiences these days because I can accurately predict what will be fulfilling and bring long-lasting satisfaction. I conserve my energy and I can set healthy boundaries. And I narrow the focus of what I'm invested in to get the desired end result. So in short form, for those of you who have yet to identify your core values, I'm going to give you a 4-step process so that you do not have to spend years and years figuring this out by yourself like I did. Number 1, start by Googling core values list. This can be a list of anywhere from 50 to 100 core values. They're not all going to be there. It's going to be okay. Just start with a list and mark off any that you think might apply to you and set it aside. Number 2, in another sitting, go through those ones that you've marked off and circle your top 10 and maybe your top 5 if you're capable of doing that, but if not, just your top 10. Step 3, take more time. Think about those top ones that you circled and see if you can rank them. There are no wrong answers. No values are better or worse to have, and your values can change over time. So there's, it's all good. None of this is set in stone. Give yourself lots of grace and space to discover what's true for you. Then take your, top 3 to 5 and see if you can apply those values towards any dreams that you have. The possible paths to achieving those dreams and goals will narrow down, and you'll be able to find a path to achievement that has you living in alignment with your core values along the way to getting those goals met. And we're going to talk more about that next month. I hope you'll do this exercise over the next month so we can really start 2022 off with really great foundational understanding of ourselves and how to harness and apply our ambition. The goal here isn't just an end result, but rather a life path that is deeply fulfilling along the way. The joy in the journey, that is what I wish for each of you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Women of Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Calder-Hume. For more podcast episodes, visit womenofambitionpodcast.com or listen on any podcast app.